Headlines pledging a new conciliatory start. South and North Korea kick off a joint committee responsible for ensuring undisrupted operations at their symbolic joint business park in North Korea's border town of Gaeseong. Inflation perceived by Korean consumers is more than 4 times higher than that measured by the government, as prices for goods and services closely linked to everyday livelihoods have risen steeply. While the White House is seeking congressional approval for a military strike for last month's chemical attack in Syria, Arab nations call for action against the Bashar al-Assad regime. Well, these stories and more next on Primetime News. Good evening and welcome to Primetime News. It's Monday, September 2nd here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Yoo Ji-hae.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thank you so much for joining us. We begin this evening with inter-Korean talks being held in the North Korean border town of Gaeseong. The two Koreas are currently holding the first meeting of the joint committee that will be in charge of ensuring the resumption of the shuttered joint industrial complex.
For more details on how the talks are proceeding, we connect live by phone to our Jin-ju. So Jin-ju, it's been almost 12 hours since the meeting kicked off between the two sides. What are some of the sticking points?
Gia, the two Koreas are known to have started their fourth round of today's talks at around 9:30 p.m. Korea time, which is still ongoing at this hour. It seems that the issue of when the two Koreas will resume operations at the business park is what's dragging the meeting out. This is the topic the two Koreas are most divided on. While the North wants business at the park to restart as soon as possible, South Korea is taking a rather cautious stance. Seoul wants to set up regulatory measures first to prevent another abrupt shutdown of the complex in the future. Ahead of the morning session of the meeting, which lasted for nearly 2 hours, the heads of the joint committee, Kim Gi-young from the south and Park Chol-soo from the north, expressed their expectations of the talks. Let's take a listen.
It is a season of harvest, and I hope we can see some fruitful outcomes from every meeting we hold in the future.
I believe we can achieve results in the first meeting in line with the good season.
Now, the two sides are also continuing their discussions on the role of the committee, the divisions that will be set up under the committee, and how often they will hold meetings. The two Koreas will likely agree on holding a committee meeting every quarter and division meetings every month to discuss ways to better manage the industrial complex. Other than that, the committee will focus on the management of the entry and exit of South Korean people working at the site, communications, protection of investment assets, and globalization of the business park.
All right, Jin-ju, thanks so much for that. That was our Jin-ju reporting to us on the latest on the Gaeseong committee meeting.
And with the outlook of inter-Korean relations looking up, officials from China and North Korea recently discussed reopening the long-stalled six-party talks.
A Chinese foreign ministry spokesman said during a regular briefing on Monday that China's top nuclear envoy, Wu Da-wei, exchanged views on the current state of affairs on the Korean peninsula, as well as a resumption of the denuclearization talks. Beijing, however, didn't elaborate on Pyongyang's stance toward the matter. Wu visited Pyongyang for a 5-day visit last week and met with several high-ranking North Korean officials, including the North's first vice foreign minister and the point man on nuclear issues, Kim Gae-kwon. In what turned out to be dashed hopes for the release of detained American citizen Kenneth Bae, Pyongyang last week rescinded its invitation for U.S. Special Envoy for North Korean human rights issues, Robert King, to negotiate Bae's return.
The North pulled the plug on expectations of mending sour ties with the U.S. by blaming Washington's use of strategic nuclear-capable bombers in a joint military exercise with South Korea.
For more on Pyongyang's abrupt cancellation of King's visit, we're joined by Dr. Cheol-woo Kim, Senior Research Fellow at Korea Institute for Defense Analyses, here in the studio. Welcome.
Good to be here.
Right, that's Dr. Kim. At the 11th hour, North Korea retracted its invitation for a U.S. envoy. What seems to have changed your mind?
It's very hard to their real intention, but I can summarize into 3 points. Number one is Washington actually at this point technically pushed away the North Korean Kenneth Bay issue as the back burner. So I think the North Korea might perceive this is not the right time. So invitation canceling and blaming is kind of a way of their kind of tactical maneuvering. So I think the cancellation is not totally cancellation. My understanding is it's delayed. So number 3 point is the 10-day military jail last day, they blaming that the last day. It's absurd. So I think the blaming is not important. Timing is the key to understand this situation.
Well, one of the reasons that Washington cited for pursuing Kenneth Bay's release was to get him out of the hospital due to his deteriorating health. If anything happens to him while he's in the hospital, apparently in Pyongyang, how will that affect relations between those two countries?
I think the Kenneth Bay's case, the health situation, more dire situation, will increase their propagandistic effect to the international community. So they don't care about the physical condition of Kenneth Bay. That's the very unhappy thing to see at this point.
Right, but despite North Korea's about-face, it seems the inter-Korean talks on the reunions of families separated by the Korean War and the joint industrial complex in Gaeseong and the tourism project in Mount Kumgang, they seem to be going well. So what's your prospect of the inter-Korean dialogue?
Inter-Korean dialogue, I'm very optimistic because the North Korea trying to use the inter-Korean dialogue reconciliatory mood as the only viable exit strategy at this international, diplomatic isolation, economic sanctions. So they have no money, no cash to develop their human rights. I mean, the North Korean people's livelihood standards. So Kim Jong-un desperately needs money at this point. The only exit accessible way is the inter-Korean dialogue. So even the Gaeseong Industrial Complex negotiation, they really want to swift reopening, full-scale operations of the cash incoming activities. So I think the very positive at this point because the North Korean situation has no other way to get the cash and international, kind of acceptance level.
Well, even though these inter-Korean talks are going well, they're on issues that we've had established before that broke down mainly because of North Korea's unwillingness. How does Seoul prevent this from happening yet again?
That's the beauty of the Park Geun-hye government, step-by-step, very principle-based control approach. Instead of rushing to the negotiating table, from the Gaeseong and family reunion, Mountain Kumgang, although it's kind of happening rhetorically, at the same juncture, the Park Geun-hye government's very steady approach is very rising to choose. So I think the Park Geun-hye administration is not like the previous administration. So trust building measures, Korean Peninsula trust building processes, and can have a great future because of the North Koreans' domestic problems and her successful summit meeting with Xi Jinping followed by Obama. I think that overall North Koreans has no diverse cards like they used before.
Right. All right. Okay, Dr. Kim, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before your day ends and another begins, get the latest news live from Seoul.
Residents whose features
is on the rise.
closing ceremony.
Expert analysis from Asia's heartbeat.
The legislature, circumstances.
With a viewpoint only Korea's global network can provide.
The United States, the latest report, less than
Unrivaled access from a team always on standby.
Meaning came on to news are trying to cover up the South's true intentions.
Over now to the latest on the probe into an alleged revolt plot in the country. The National Assembly has begun deliberation procedures over the arrest of left-leaning lawmaker Lee Seok-gi, who's accused of plotting to topple the government. A vote is expected to take place on Wednesday on whether to give prosecutors the okay. Our Han Da-eun has more.
The ongoing criminal probe surrounding leftist lawmaker Lee Seok-gi took center stage on the opening day of the National Assembly's 100-day regular session. During the first plenary session on Monday, lawmakers read a bill requesting approval for Lee's arrest and officially launched deliberation procedures over the matter. Yi, a member of the Unified Progressive Party and allegedly pro-North Korea, has thrown Korea's political arena into a new turmoil for allegedly plotting to stage a rebellion against the current government. According to current law, a bill can be put to a vote between 24 and 72 hours after being read at a plenary session. Both the ruling and opposition parties look set to hold the vote on Wednesday after spending Tuesday holding internal discussions. But with the main opposition Democratic Party reportedly agreeing to go along with the arrest bill, it is highly likely to gain parliamentary approval. If the bill does pass, it'll be submitted to the court after being reviewed by the Justice Ministry and the prosecutor's office. The far-left lawmaker has been accused of conspiring with members of a secret organization called the Revolutionary Organization, or RO, in May to blow up major infrastructure in the nation, such as communication centers and oil storage tanks, police stations, and armories. A tape recording obtained by the nation's spy agency reportedly has E and RO members discussing detailed ways to sabotage the South Korean government and U.S. troops in the event of an inter-Korean war. E still denies the charges against him. Han Da-eun, Arirang News.
On the economic front, the government says consumer price inflation has been quite stable for the past 10 months, in fact. But out in the marketplace, Korean consumers don't seem to agree. Kim Min-ji has more on how wide the gap between the official figures and public perception has become.
Chuseok, the Korean equivalent of Thanksgiving, is just around the corner and homemakers are busy shopping for groceries. But they are having a hard time choosing products to fit their budget due to soaring food prices.
Prices for the same types of fruits vary, and I'm not satisfied with the ones that I can afford.
Official figures indicate the consumer prices are stabilizing, but the public seems to think differently. Statistics Korea said Monday that the nation's consumer prices edged up just 1.3% in August compared to the same month last year. Consumer prices have been rising slowly over the past several months and have stayed in the 1% range for 10 straight months. This is well below the central bank's inflation target band of 2.5% to 3.5% this year. A recent survey conducted by Hyundai Research Institute, however, shows that the inflation rate felt by Koreans is 4 times greater than official figures. Consumers feel they have experienced a 5.4% rise in prices in the first half of this year from the same period a year earlier. Researchers attribute the discrepancy in the real and imagined figures to the price hikes of domestic agricultural products due to unfavorable weather conditions and an increase in the prices of daily necessities.
The financial burden of housing expenses, education, and food products needs to be reduced so households can make ends meet.
Experts say that the discrepancy in the real and imagined prices will likely widen due to an expected rise in housing rental prices and taxi fares in the second half of the year. The government last week predicted that consumer prices in Korea will increase 1.7% this year. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Moving now to the government's efforts to support real estate transactions, the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport has announced plans to inject around $7.2 billion this year to support 120,000 households that are trying to buy or rent new homes. The move is part of government measures unveiled last week to lessen the burden of mostly low and middle-income households. The ministry says that people who are hoping to move into new homes would be able to secure loans with lower interest rates starting next Monday.
While the world awaits the results of a UN investigation into Syria, Washington cited new evidence on the country's alleged chemical weapons attacks. The revelations come as the Obama administration is pressuring Congress to support the president's case for airstrikes on Syria. Our Kim Hyun-bin has the details.
Describing it as a very important new development, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry took to the airwaves Sunday to say there was proof sarin was used in last month's attack.
We have learned through samples that were provided to the United States and that have now been tested from first responders in East Damascus, and hair samples and blood samples have tested positive for signatures of sarin.
This is the first time the U.S. government has singled out the use of a specific chemical in the attack that killed over 1,400 people. Kerry's comments come after President Obama said he would seek congressional approval for airstrikes against Syria, a move that will hold up a strike for at least 9 days.
And I don't believe that my former colleagues in the United States Senate and the House will turn their backs on all of our interests, on the credibility of our country, on the norms with respect to the enforcement of the prohibition against the use of chemical weapons, which has been in place since 1925.
Backing from Congress won't be easy, with many Democrats and Republicans wary of war and uneasy about intervening in the Syrian conflict. Speaking to NBC Sunday, Republican Senator Rand Paul said he didn't see American interests on either side of the Syrian war, adding that the Senate might back Obama, but the vote was far from a slam dunk case in the House. Kerry did not mention if Obama would go ahead with the strike without Congress backing, but did say the president had the right to attack without his support. The House and the Senate are expected to vote on the week of September 9th. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Now, despite fears that local fishery products have been tainted by radiation from Japan, the Korean government says there's nothing to worry about. The reassurance is not likely to ease concerns, though, especially after Japanese officials reported that radiation levels from Fukushima nuclear plant are 18 times higher than previously thought. Akanya Lee has more.
The Korean government is trying to reassure the public that imported fishery products from Japan are indeed safe, despite the radiation leak. Since 2011 until now, out of the 66,000 plus imported fishery products from Japan, none of them have exceeded the maximum legal limit of radiation of 100 becquerel per kilogram. Still, the government is taking extra measures to prevent any contaminated products by the Fukushima nuclear plant leak from entering the local market. On Monday, Korea's Ministry of Food and Drug Safety announced that it is thoroughly monitoring fish at local markets and increasing the frequency of radiation checks. The ministry says that health officials will make regular visits to Seoul's Norangjin Fish Market, one of the largest markets in Korea, and to a warehouse of frozen fish products in Incheon. Inspectors are also cracking down on labels of all fishery products to make sure they clearly state the origin of products. The ministry adds that it will continue to inform the public on the results of the inspections. And looking forward, the inspection results on all imported fishery products from Japan will be made public every day to ease public concerns. The results of the radiation checks were first posted just once a week, but now will be available daily on the ministry's homepage. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
Istanbul is currently playing host to the Istanbul Gyeongju World Culture Expo, aimed at advancing cultural exchanges between Korea and Turkey. In times for the 3-week festival, our Hwang Ji-hye takes a look at economic ties between the two countries and where they are headed.
Korea and Turkey may not be major trading partners with each other, but the economic ties of the two countries still seem to hold meaning. The trade volume between the two nations rose after the global financial crisis in 2009, reaching over $5.2 billion last year. Korea's major export products to Turkey include automobiles, ships, and steel products, while petroleum products and auto parts are some of the major imports from Turkey. And to further boost the economic relationship, a bilateral free trade pact between Korea and Turkey went into effect last May. Experts say the trade deal is especially meaningful for a country like Korea, as it relies heavily on exports and has to continuously tap into new markets.
Turkey has a good geopolitical location connecting Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. It also has a strong labor force, with half of them younger than 30. This also means Turkey has the potential to be an active domestic market.
Fully aware of the potential the Turkish market possesses, Korean companies like Hyundai Motor and POSCO, a steelmaking company, are actively investing in the nation. Korea's total investments in Turkey stood at around $1.2 billion last year, so it's no wonder the two nations are now in talks for a free trade deal in the service and investment sectors.
Once the FTA talks for service and investment sectors wrap up, Korea will be the first nation to have such an inclusive trade deal with Turkey that's expected to deepen economic ties between the two countries. 황지혜, Arirang News.
Rhythmic gymnast Son Yeon-jae has her sights set on the rest of the season after finishing 5th at the World Championships over the weekend.
And Stephen Che joins us in the Sports Center for more. Stephen.
Hey guys, Son Yeon-jae did not medal on her way to 5th place at the World Rhythmic Gymnastic Championships in Ukraine, but she's already looking ahead. As one of South Korea's most popular athletes, it was a bit disappointing not seeing her with a podium finish. The 19-year-old said that she trained hard and performed as best as she could, but that it was frustrating not being in top condition for the last event. Still, it was a great overall performance from Son, who returned to South Korea for domestic competitions in Gangwon on September 7th and in Incheon in October. Moving on to European football, the English Premier League's Tottenham Hotspurs have transferred star forward Gareth Bale to Spanish League giants Real Madrid in a world record deal. La Liga's Real paid Tottenham a record £86 million, roughly $132 million for the transfer, eclipsing the amount they paid for superstar Cristiano Ronaldo back in 2009. Los Blancos will pay the 24-year-old Bale $265,000 a week after taxes during his 6-year stint with the club. And finally, it's time to talk baseball. The KBO takes a day off on Monday, so let's get right to the standings. The Samsung Lions remain at the top for yet another week, holding on by a thread. LG holds on to second, nipping at the heels of baseball's best team. Meanwhile, the Doosan Bears won 3 games last week, staying in third as the 4th-place Nexen Heroes coast a game behind. Now on to the bottom half, the Lotte Giants hang in there in 5th, doing well but unable to catch the Heroes. The SK Knights continue their late-season run, sitting just 4.5 behind the last playoff spot. All the while, Kia, NC, and Hanwha continue to sweep the floor at the bottom of the list. Now that does it for me here in the Sports Center. This has been Stephen Che. Check back at midnight for the latest in the world of sports.
Now it's time to go over to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Hello, Bo-kyung.
Hello, Sean and Chi-hye. If you plan on heading out in the morning or at night, from now on, make sure to grab a cardigan.
Yes, the temperature gap has widened, so will this continue for a while?
Yes, so please take care of your health. Before we move on to tomorrow's temperatures, let's take a look at the satellite map. The 17th tropical storm Toraji is making its way up from Taiwan, and it is expected to arrive in Korea over the weekend. Although it is likely that the typhoon will miss us, please stay on the watch. Tomorrow, we have another beautiful day in forecast. In general, the nation should see clear skies. However, there may be rain in the East Coast regions, so those of you in Gangwon province may want to keep an umbrella handy. With that in mind, let's take a look at tomorrow's numbers. Seoul, Daegu, and Gwangju should get up to 29 degrees, while Busan should make it to 27. Moving on to other regions, Daejeon and Jeju should peak in the high 20s. Meanwhile, it should rain in Mount Kumgang, reaching 17 degrees. Well, that's all I have for you now, but join me for another update after midnight.
And that's our broadcast on this Monday night. I'm Yoo Ji-hye in Seoul.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for joining us. Have a great evening. We'll see you soon.